tuned in to 92.1 WOMR FM Provincetown and 91.3 WFMR FM Orleans, the voice and spirit of Cape Cod. I bid you welcome to another episode of Healing Wisdom. I'm your host, Pandora Peoples, chartered herbalist and psychic medium. Healing Wisdom explores mind, body, soul connections as we discuss the healing effects of the arts, metaphysical concepts, intuition, and the spiritual aspects of everyday living. Healing Wisdom begins in the heart. Our theme music is provided by Mystic Pete. Hello out there. Today, I'm really thrilled to have our delightful guest, RaMa. You started off as a doula. You studied Neolithic goddess cultures at Hampshire College. You got your BA there, and you've studied many things. I have this beautiful bio for you. So you're an astrologer. We're going to talk about astrology today, and especially all the things that are coming out for this big 2022 year. We're just going to get a little glimpse. You're offering a master class. You're also a cosmic high priestess. You're an herbalist. You have a podcast, Stars, Stones, and Stories. And you just got back from a pilgrimage to Egypt. And so you're going to tell us all about your experience there. You have these beautiful pictures of you at like what looks like Karnak, but you'll tell us. And, and you have the Earth Seed Temple Arts for the Aquarian Age, which is an online mystery school.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. It's great to meet you, Pandora.
Before we get into the astrological stuff and your whole background in astrology and your philosophy, I'd love for you to talk about Egypt. You just got back. You brought a pilgrimage there, and you facilitate dark moon councils and other empowerment workshops with women. And this is part of that. So tell us what happened.
Yeah. So I've definitely been on a conscious priestess path since my late teenage years, and got initiated as a priestess, actually in service to Isis when I was about 19, 20. And when I moved to the Asheville area in 2012, at the time my daughter was 18 months old, and I was really focused on motherhood. I had known from my birth and postpartum doula work that children really thrive when the mother is fully present with them for the first 4 years of life. And so I'd really made that commitment to make being a mother my full-time focus. And I noticed when I moved to this area, it seemed like the birth community was really thriving. And I had been a birth and postpartum doula in Los Angeles, where I myself was pregnant and gave birth. And so I'm the kind of person that I always like to see, what does a community need? I don't want to just, because I am so versatile and I have a lot of different gifts that I've bring to the table, passions I've studied in depth. So I saw in this community, it seemed like the birth world was really thriving. And there were other pieces, elements that I felt like really called to activate. And one of that was deep women's work. And so I started holding these dark moon councils around 2014. And I've held them every new moon, the night before the new moon, every single month, except for when I've been away on pilgrimage. And in the pandemic, there was a portion of time where I held them virtually, but when I was able to, I moved them back in person. So I'm really committed to those gatherings. And it was actually through those dark moon gatherings that I started feeling a call to bring women into a deeper experience on the land. And I've always been called to pilgrimage. I went on my first pilgrimage in 2003 when I was right before I turned 23 after my grandmother's death. And she played a huge role in my life. And her death really rocked my world. And I got to be with her through that portal of transition. And I learned a lot through that experience. And it was a time of a great passage of grief as well. And so there was something really profound because she died right at spring equinox in 2003. And there's something really profound that summer later on going to Avalon, to Glastonbury on this pilgrimage. And that awoke within my body, within my bones, this deep connection of traveling on the land and what happens. And I think I got initiated into it really early on, actually, because I was born in Alexandria, Louisiana, and I only lived there for 7 days. And I've moved and traveled my whole life. So I've always felt like a bit like a pilgrim or a gypsy. And it was through these dark moon ceremonies and gatherings that I felt the call to really commit to bringing women on pilgrimage. And it tied all the way back to something that got really awoken within myself as well at Hampshire College when I started studying Paleolithic and Neolithic goddess culture. So in 2017, in honor of the total solar eclipse in Leo, I stewarded my first pilgrimage to Glastonbury, to Avalon. And that just opened up this whole gate where there's been many, many more pilgrimages that have happened. And so, yeah, this December 2021, I brought a group to Egypt, and it was profound. Yeah. I haven't posted any pictures yet of this pilgrimage. I always wait. When I'm on pilgrimage, I really go off of social media and I'm really present for the pilgrimage. And I wait until everyone's back home before I start sharing images, just because I want to keep the field as sacred as possible. Especially because there are other participants involved, and the work we do is like none other. It's a really deep experience. So this journey, we traveled to different temples and sacred sites in Luxor. We began in Luxor on the total solar eclipse in Sagittarius, and that was conjunct the great attractor, which is like this great cosmic womb of all of the cosmic wombs of the galaxies, very massive, massive portal. And then we went out to Siwa, which is in the western desert of Egypt near the border of Libya. And there's a lot of really sacred healing waters there. And then we culminated in the Giza area and went to many different pyramids and really worked with this pyramid consciousness frequency.
I'm just excited to hear more about these trips, like especially your first trip to Glastonbury, but also as an astrologer, what's really cool is that you understand when the best times to go, and the fact that when you travel, you activate different parts of yourself, because astrologically, like I'll credit Martha Clark with telling me that when you move physically across the globe, especially large distances, it puts your relocated chart, whether it's temporary or for longer periods, moves everything in the degrees or in the houses. And so the way that we feel when we travel is different than the way, not only is the culture different wherever we are, even if it's within our own, language, but we're activated by being in different places, whether there's so much to it. It could be predecessor energy. It could be past lives. It could be just connecting to, the Akashic records or this greater consciousness, or just learning from the invisible worlds or whatever it is. But we have this cosmic connection when we travel. It brings new sort of revelations and feelings and energies to light. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about like some of the standout memories.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely like super intentional with the astrology around any pilgrimage that I'm called to craft. And that has been like number one for me. And it's something that, maybe not every single participant fully gets, and that's okay. They don't have to. Although I do like weave in sessions where I'm teaching about the astrology and what's important that's happening. And I've definitely found that traveling on eclipses is very momentous. I mean, every pilgrimage is so unique. It's like giving birth. And for me, it's a conversation with the divine. I don't just say on a whim, like, oh, I want to take a pilgrimage to this place and we're going to go at this time of month and this is what we're going to do. It's really a conversation I'm having with the divine. I'm receiving guidance, and I've learned how to trust that, and I've learned how to follow the intuitive leads. So that was really how the first pilgrimage came through to Glastonbury, and every other pilgrimage, whether it's been to France or Egypt, has been similar in that sense. And so I've learned to listen and I've learned to trust, which is not easy, because pilgrimage work is like a gamble. I don't know if people are going to come. I don't know, with especially this year in 2021, there was so much at stake around COVID and, what if I had gotten COVID before I flew? So many what ifs. And you just have to learn to really go in and trust that connection with the divine. So it is, for me, it's like a mutual reciprocity with the other world. And I feel like the more that I trust that, it offers a container for the participants to have an experience around that. And what I'm finding, having stewarded numerous pilgrimages at this point, and having gone on many myself, whether they've been just me or, I've attended a couple of other people's, there's many different ways I've had that experience. I find I just go deeper and deeper into this conversation with the goddess, with the divine. And this last trip to Egypt was definitely the deepest. I can say just alone, we began on the total solar eclipse, and we began in this special temple that's in the middle of the desert in Upper Egypt. And it's this Nekbet temple that is connected to the primordial form of Isis in her vulture form. And so we think of the vulture, this protective bird frequency. And in my studies of Paleolithic and Neolithic goddesses, in many different cultures, we can see that the goddess goes back into two different forms, either the bird or the snake. And that's part of the reason why I so love ancient Egyptian cosmology, because Upper Egypt is represented by the bird, by the vulture, and Lower Egypt is represented by the wajet, or the snake. So you have the snake and bird, and it's just the cosmology is just so genius. The multitude of layers that are presented. Egypt is such a rich land for understanding the symbolism. For me, Avalon, Glastonbury was the space that it's known as the heart chakra of the earth. And so it really is the space that, as I think about myself, and at the age of 22, when I first went to that land in the flesh, it really did connect me deep with my heart and open me up. The world was so different then in 2003 than it is now. We didn't have smartphones. People weren't posting themselves all over Instagram as being a witch or a priestess. People didn't talk about that at all. That was very hidden and very sacred. And not that it's not sacred anymore, but there's also been, I kind of wince sometimes on social media because it's hard. It's hard to share certain things, but it also feels necessary to put authentic voices out on social media because so many people are kind of capitalizing off of the sacred and, what is devotional. And when I think about what was going on in 2003, it was a very different landscape.
I was doing full moon and new moon, mostly full moon actually gatherings and equinoxes and solstices. It was a very different climate. I mean, at least in LA, Los Angeles, just very, very different. It was not cool. It was not at all. Because
No.
I think, because I'm 40 and I think, well, women must have been having, I had my child at 25, but I think women must have been having their children at 20. And that's why these 20-year-olds are so comfortable, like being like, I'm a witch. Cause I'm not, it's just kind of interesting. I never wanted to take photos of anything because I felt like it would immediately take us out of it and it would become about something different. And I felt like the more private, the more powerful and potent. Now, I don't know.
Exactly.
My philosophy has changed a little bit, but at the same time, sometimes you really need privacy around sacred stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so like I'll never take a picture. Like sometimes I'm like, I see my clients on the table and like the other day I saw a vulture at the end of the table and I thought it was Egyptian and I wasn't making any kind of connection. I was just like, I told my client, I'm like, there's a vulture spirit here, but it's not like a South American condor. It seems more Egyptian. And it was just a really profound healing session. So, so I'm like, yeah. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, they look so like blissed out. Like it'd be great to take a photo, but I'm like, no. But it does raise a lot of questions. I personally like to be in situations where I feel very safe especially when other people are leading the ceremony and I don't have so much control. I want to be able to feel private so I can just go really deep.
We're in such an interesting age with the digital currency of all kinds, whether it's actual currency or our data, images, our words, all of it. It's a phenomenal time because we don't fully know the ramifications of it or where we're going to go as a culture. I know that a lot of people have different fears and concerns, and I think a lot of them are really valid. But it's also, we've got to take into consideration the creative human spirit. And I think, at the end of the day, in people's hearts, a lot of people are desiring a sovereign life. So it should be interesting to see where we go, in this Aquarian age, because we're really just like dipping our toe in the water. And so like we're of the same generation, and that landscape was so different from how it is now. These pilgrimages are like a activation with the land, where we as the humans get to activate the land, but then we also get to receive something from the land. It's like this mutual reciprocity. And I really believe, because I do work, it's part of the reason why my podcast is called Stars, Stones, and Stories, is I do work with the stars, like astrology, cosmology, different forms of divination, but I also do work with the stones, which are like the bones of the earth. They're the bones of our body. I've been studying Taoist stone medicine for a number of years, and I've been working with mineral medicine for the majority of my life. Very connected to stones. And we ourselves are like walking crystals. So, a lot of people in this day and age get caught up in all the tools, but at the end of the day, we don't need any of them. We are the primary crystal. We are from the cosmos. We are a cosmic mirror. And so these pilgrimages just like activate that conversation given the current astrology. and given who shows up. And like I was saying before, it's like I receive um, I receive like this whole kind of transmission around the theme, the title, and I have a concept given the astrology, like what's going to happen, but I never fully know until usually I personally get initiated into the frequency of the pilgrimage, like a few weeks or months before, but I still never fully know how it's going to land until we're actually on the land. And that's the exciting part. It really is a pilgrimage. Like, this is a journey. And for me, like, this is definitely, I know, part of my medicine work in the world, because my chart ruler lives in the ninth house and I have many other planets there. And that is the house of pilgrimage, of divination. So I'm just so passionate about it. And the transformation that the participants go through is phenomenal. Like, they literally won't be the same. And there's a whole integration process. And I provide counsels before and after the pilgrimage so that there's like support in that journey, which feels really important.
Can you give folks your web addresses so they can find you?
Yeah. So my main website is earthseedtemplearts.com. And then you can actually, on that first page, you can listen to my podcast there, but my podcast is also located at starsstonesandstories.com. It's also on Spotify and iTunes and all the other like major podcasting platforms. And then my mystery school kind of has its own separate container, which is called mysterium.earthseedtemplearts.com. But you can access that from the main website, earthseedtemplearts.com. So I have a course that I crafted in 2021 called Earthseed. And it's like the foundation to the mystery school and working with stone medicine and the cycles of the moon and the solar gates as a way to start to really understand how we are these crystals on the earth and how to like ground and anchor the energy, because so many people are talking about ascension in these times. But I'm really of the belief that like we want to harness that frequency and we're meant to like anchor it to earth. And how do we do that? What are some tools that are simple and connect us with the elements? So I purposely created that course first. And in this year coming up in 2022, I'll be launching my astrology courses as a way to help guide people. I've been also in the process of completing my Master of Arts in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology. So I'm finishing my dissertation right now. It's due at the end of January. And once that's like done, then I can really like focus on some of these other projects I've been looking forward to giving birth to.
Oh, that sounds very cool.
It's basically like a version of an anthropology degree. So we're looking at cosmology in depth. We're looking at different cultures and civilizations, the psyche, there's many different ways, the history of astrology. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I've learned so much in this program, and it's based out of University of Wales through the Sophia Center. So it's also a very international program, which I've really appreciated.
Do you want to give us a little bit of a taste of 2022? You have a masterclass that's coming up that you're going to be teaching, and of course, that's going to go way, way, way in depth.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll be teaching a live online masterclass for 2022 about the astrology for 2022. I think first it's important to kind of speak to where we've been. I know in astrology, I think a lot of people are always like so kind of like forward motion, But astrology is waves. And if we really want to like master it and understand it, we also need to understand where we're coming from and the patterns of the past. That's really, really important. And it was last year in 2020 on winter solstice that Jupiter and Saturn met up at the first degree of Aquarius. And at the beginning of that year, in January of 2020, we had Saturn and Pluto. They met up in Capricorn around 22 degrees, but that was a big conjunction. So they're both actually called great conjunctions that we could debate about. You know, I could tell you academically when that started and all of that, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. So when we have like Jupiter and Saturn come together, they come together every 20 years. And it was in the 80s, like around 81, 82, that they first met up in Libra. And then in 2000, they met up in Taurus. And so when they met up in Libra in 1981, that was like the taste of the air age. But prior to the 80s, every 20 years prior, for quite a number of years, they were meeting up in earth energies. So when we think of earth, we think of resources. Collectively, we can think of oil, you know, we can think of gold, you know, kind of like the natural resources that humans mine for. And with this great conjunction that happened in 2020, it was in Aquarius. So it really locked in the new air age. And so between now and a number of 20-year segments, we're going to be in what is deemed an air age. So when we think of the air, we think of the sky, we think of the mind, and that's exactly where we're going to see the greatest changes, right? Like in the pandemic, more and more satellites going up into the sky, right? Who owns the sky? Who owns the rights? Like, this is something humans haven't really thought about. Like, who owns the rights over your roof, right? Like, we assume we do, but you know, this could be something that corporations start like wanting to put like floating ads on top of our roofs or whatever, right? So these are things that might start to shift for us. Also, more air travel, whether it's space travel or through the air in different capacities. And also our connection with technology, because technology is so related to air. So we're in this new air age. But then also we had that conjunction between Saturn and Pluto at the beginning of 2020. And one thing I want to say is that in 2021, we had settled into that new air age. And then we've had Saturn in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus 3 times in the year of 2021. And Uranus entered Taurus back in 2018. It was on the Taurus new moon in May. And that was a really big deal. And Uranus, like the cycles, you know, can last about like 8 years or so, give or take. And it's these outer planets that create these generational signatures. And Uranus went from Aries to Taurus. So Uranian energy is very erratic, sudden, out of the blue, disruptive, but bringing drastic changes that need to come to light. And in an earth sign, so focused on our connection to Mother Earth, to our resources, how do we utilize our resources? How do we create beauty and elegance and culture with the earth again? Because we've kind of lost sight of that. But also, how do we connect to our money and our money systems? And these are all the things that we've been starting to see drastic changes around. So in 2021, we had these squares between Saturn, that which wants to like limit us for our own self-mastery, and Aquarius, so focused on the power of the mind, but also technology. And on some level, we could even say government and systems, because Saturn rules those. And Aquarius is actually ruled by Saturn in traditional astrology. So that's why in the year of 2021, we felt a lot of restrictions and concerns about public health and also our data. Who gets to utilize our data? Who owns our data? What does it mean to have these passports that are digitized, where everything's digitized, right? Like, where does that information go? So these have been the big conversations, and the squares have brought a lot of tension and a lot of concerns. And that sets the stage for what we're going to be working with in 2022. So 2022 for us in the United States, it's a really big deal because we are beginning our Pluto return. Now, the Pluto return will be our first one. The United States was declared a nation on July 4th, 1776. And the Pluto return begins in February, around February 20th of 2022. And there's a few different peaks throughout the year of 2022. But the thing about these kind of transits is we're already feeling it. So there might be something earth-shattering that happens within the US around February 20th. And there may not be, right? It's kind of hard to predict exactly how it's going to happen, but we're already seeing, especially those of us who are really attuned and sensitive, we're already seeing before our very eyes how these systems that we've believed in, perhaps, or maybe not, are beginning to crumble. The facade is becoming apparent, right? Like, whether it's in our government, in our medicine, even in certain corporate systems, like certain airline companies, we can just see where the ability to kind of keep up with like the kind of lifestyle we've been living may not be long-term sustainable. And then also we want to consider race and the indigenous cultures of the United States that have never been acknowledged as per our government, right? That's going to be a major theme, because if we as a nation don't deal with that, it's very likely that this culture could collapse. We're kind of at a crossroads. Are we going to honor the fact that African Americans built this country, and are we going to honor the fact that the only reason why this country exists is because it's laying on, many cities are built on Native American burial grounds? That needs to be dealt with. So it's going to be up to our governmental systems, but also we, the people, to demand that, and to demand it in a good way too. So that all begins with each one of us in our own individual lives and how we're showing up. And when we think about going through this Pluto return, I think that there's that saying, the personal is political. Like, what are we doing in our own daily lives, and how do we face this? So as a whole, that's one of the biggest transits of 2022 that we'll feel all the way from February through December. And some astrologers, like sidereal astrologers, would argue that we don't begin the Pluto return until 2024. Like I said before, I really see it as an overarching window, and I believe we're already in it, and we've been in it since 2020. But that's my own personal opinion. Now, we begin the year of 2022 with Venus retrograde. So Venus went retrograde on December 19th, on that Gemini full moon that opposed the galactic center. And so we start the new year with Venus retrograde, and she's all about what we love and what we value. And she's in Capricorn. And so she's really asking us, like, what is our vision? What are we visioning? What are we building in our lives? And so we begin the new year being asked to go deep within and reflect on that. And I think it's actually a really beautiful way to begin the new year. The first new moon of the year, it's in Capricorn and Venus is retrograde. So we're really being asked to think about like, what's your 1 year plan? What's your 5 year plan? What's your 10 year plan? Your 25, it's, we don't want to just be living our day-to-day lives just to do the day-to-day. If we want to grow and evolve consciousness, it's important to vision. And so Venus is really reminding us of that. But she's also circling back through these degrees where that Saturn-Pluto conjunction happened in January of 2020. So she's stirring up some deep-seated, for some, actual traumas, right? And asking us to really clear out and heal the stories around that as well. Pluto brings in great, great transformation. But at the end of the day, I mean, my connection with Pluto is so much around sovereignty and truth and really being in right relationship. And Pluto demands that. And anything that is of like not of that caliber, Pluto will strip away at any price, in a fierce way. But as I say that, I realize for people who have not been really initiated consciously where they're aware of it in Pluto work, it can sound a little terrifying, but it doesn't have to be. It's only terrifying when we refuse to surrender, when we're trying to like grasp to the old ways. And we can see that collectively in the US. There's a big fight to grasp to the old ways. And if we choose that, it's like shooting ourselves in the foot. It's not going to be long-term sustainable, and we will lose so much. But if we choose to get in there and get gritty and do the real work, as uncomfortable as it is, and I think a big piece of that is really honoring the true story of the Native Americans and really honoring the true passage of Africans to this country and what it meant to be stripped of, for both cultures. Cultures isn't really the right term because we're talking about a myriad of cultures, to be stripped of your language, your gods and goddesses, your beliefs, your land, your foods, your clothing, all the things, right? It's like, it's got to be faced, and it's messy work. So a lot of people would rather avoid it and, scroll through social media because that can bring in some instant gratification. But the kind of work we're talking about doesn't, the solutions don't come easily. They could, but they may not. And I do see it as a big ancestral piece. And I do believe we're really well supported by the ancestors to do this work. In fact, I believe those of us who are here on Earth came here for these times, and we're actually well equipped. And our highest selves want us to be engaged. And it does create hope and possibility for our descendants, because if we're willing to do this, it can really set the stage for true communion with Earth consciousness again, not some sort of greenwashing smart city bullshit. There's this big push for all these smart cities right now, and it's another form of greenwashing, and it's another way of just like tracking humans, and it's a big issue. It's not cool that I live in North Carolina and suddenly Duke Energy is interested in solar power and whatever. It's like, well, where were you 10 years ago? They're only doing it for, certain kinds of financial gain, but are they actually going to do it in a clean way, in a good way? Probably not. It's like these companies that bottle water, like Dasani and Aquafina, they go into indigenous cultures, they take their water supply, they shut them away from their water supply. They, quote, purify it and put fluoride and other chemicals in it and put it in petroleum-based plastic bottles and then sell it back to the people who had built a life around collecting their own water. So the United States represents this symbol of freedom and hope and diversity that, whether or not we fully see that on this land, it is a symbol of that. And so what happens in the Pluto return is going to be really important for the whole collective of Mother Earth and humanity as a whole. And we're at this like real powerful crossroads. So it's a massive time on the planet. And if anyone has their Pluto in a cardinal sign like Libra, Aries, Cancer, Capricorn at the later degrees, like I would say about 22 degrees to 28 degrees, they're going to feel it in their personal lives also very strongly as well, because they're experiencing a square or an opposition or a conjunction. So that's something to note. But what I always like to just leave people with is, when we think about the vastness of astrology and how it's activating our lives, at the end of the day, it's really up to each one of us, like what we choose to do with it. And showing up consciously, anchoring into our practices, living with a generous heart, giving gratitude for what we have. Like, the solutions are really simple. They don't have to be complex, right? And I like to use astrology as a means to understand how we can like really work with these radical times we live in, but not as a means to feel like overwhelmed by it, right? So it's good to be informed, but it's really important that we stay positive in these times and that we talk to our bodies, in a way of staying positive, because we are these beautiful crystals. And when we send that message within our body system, then that vibrates out and we help others. Whereas if we take in this kind of like defeated consciousness, it's not going to elevate others. It's certainly not going to elevate our own lives. So I think it's important that we understand that each one of us is really powerful, and that we did come, to do this work on Earth right now. And it's pretty exciting.
Thank you, RaMa. We've been speaking with RaMa of Earthseed Temple Arts. You've been listening to Healing Wisdom, a Thursday morning weekly show featuring guests who share their journeys and expertise, providing us with food for thought. I'm your host, Pandora Peoples, Reiki and shamanic practitioner. You can find Healing Wisdom podcasts at WOMR.org or on Facebook and Instagram pages. We're listening to O Mashe Bello from Alessandro Esposito. You can find his music at soundcloud.com/Alessandro-Esposito-10.